everyone, Kelly here with Burlington Green. And today we're going to show you a few simple sewing skills for you to mend your clothing and fabrics at home. So you might be wondering, why does this matter and why does Burlington Green care? Well, here is why. Moving towards a zero-waste lifestyle is an important part we can be making to reduce our waste. The zero-waste movement is a lifestyle or set of concepts that really focuses on reducing our consumption by reusing what we already have and diverting waste from the landfill. And while it is possible to be completely zero waste, most zero waste enthusiasts focus more on reducing the amount of waste we generate by making small changes and choices in our life. The best approach is to start small and not get too wrapped up in being perfectly zero waste. We are all learning and taking it in stride. As soon as something is damaged or broken, it's tempting or even automatic to simply throw it away and replace it instead of fixing it. This is especially true of clothing, but you can extend the life of your clothes by learning a few simple mending skills. Here we have Michelle Karam, a Burlington resident, entrepreneur, and owner of the Woolly Shell Etsy shop, here to show us a few useful sewing skills to help you mend your clothes at home.
So today we're going to be learning how to stitch some buttons on. So whether something's fallen off or you just want to add some buttons to something. First of all, the different pieces of equipment that you're going to need. You'll need a needle for stitching with, some thread. Your thread can be all-purpose, which could be polyester thread. If you're going to stitch onto something that's a natural fibre like cotton, it's a little bit better to use cotton for that. And if you're somebody who finds threading a needle a little bit tricky or maybe hard to focus on or a shaky hand, one of these nifty little tools can be helpful. So I'm just going to cut a length of thread, maybe about 20 inches or so. You can either just go ahead and thread the needle yourself. If you're not comfortable doing that, you can use your tools. I'll demonstrate how to use this tool. So you're basically going to thread the wire part of the tool through the eye of the needle. You're then going to take your thread, put that through the wire, grab it at the back, just pull a little tail through while keeping a hold of this end. Grab the tool and pull back through, and that's you threaded your needle. Alternatively, you can do it by hand. Okay, so from here, we're just going to do a knot. So all I've done is pulled both pieces till they're even. So I have a double thread here, 2 pieces. Some people like to do single thread, but for a button, double is good. It's a lot stronger. It's going to last you longer. So I've done double thread. They're even at the bottom, and there's lots of ways of tying a knot. I find the simplest way is just to twist it a little bit, wrap it around the finger, bring the end over and just kind of roll it out and pull through. Alright, don't worry if you have a little tail at the end here, because we can cut that off later. We'll start with the 2, as it's just a little bit more straightforward. So I'm just going to put my needle through the fabric, pull it all the way through until I reach the knot. And sometimes you'll get a little gathering of thread. Just sort that out by pulling it back through and straightening it out. So now we'll take our button with the 2 holes, needle through one side, okay, and then just holding on to the button here. So the next piece that I'm going to do is using either another needle or a pin to assist me in having a gap so that we're able to actually button something together. So there's 2 ways of doing this. You can either hold it on top like this, or you could hold it underneath the button as well. I'm going to put it on top just because it's easier for you to see today. So you now take your needle and thread over the top, and then you pull it down nice and snug, and having that needle on top is just going to give you enough gap. So we'll go here, and you want to try to go over the top of the pattern that you've created on the first go. A little stitch on the bottom here. You want to keep following that same pattern the whole time. And so you want to go around like that about 5 times. The next step you want to do is get it back through to the back side of the fabric. Okay, but this time when I come through, I'm not going to go through the button. I'm just going to poke it through here at an angle so that it comes out of the side of the button this time. Okay, and just make sure everything's come through properly. If you have anything like you catch the tail or anything, just use the needle to sort that out. Okay, so now it's time to take that pin out, or the other needle that you've been using, get rid of that. So you now want to wrap the thread around the little gap that you have between the fabric and the button. And again, you want to go about 5 times, keeping a decent tension on it. You want to bring that thread back through. And again, I like to try and bring it close to where I've been creating the stitch already. And from here, I'm going to go underneath the stitch and then just catch that loop and pull it into a knot. Okay, again, if you catch the tail or anything, you can just fix that before you tighten it up. Right, pull it nice and tight. Okay, there's a couple of ways of finishing this off. You could snip it here, you could do another knot if you like. Personally, I like to pass it back under the stitch and just bring it out kind of underneath the button, and then I like to do the cut there just so I don't have too many threads showing underneath. And then this tail here, again, you can just trim this. There you go, 2-hole button. So now we're going to move on to sewing a 4-hole button. Previously have already threaded our needle. Have a knot on the end. I have a double thread here. I'm just going to start off by threading that through from the back of the fabric to the front. I'll just pull that through. 4-hole is a little bit more in-depth than doing a 2-hole button, and the reason for that is that you're going to create this X pattern. Pulling the needle through and just making sure that everything at the back has kind of tightened up. Again, there's a little bit that we can fix. There we go. So I have one side, I've gone bottom left, top right, and then I go opposite side, bottom right, and I'm going to go to top left. So this is me created my X. So this same pattern is what I'm going to create on top of the button as well. So I'm taking my button, I'm using very large buttons today just to make it very clear. So I started bottom left, brought my needle through. Okay. And just like when we did the 2-hole, we're going to use a pin or something to create a little bit of a gap, and I'm going to hold that on top of here, and then I'm going to stitch into the top right on that button. Hopefully you can see, I might be covering it up a little bit. Let me get it out of the way, like that. Okay, and then I'm going to the bottom right side, through here, just pull that needle through, and then up to the top left. And so you just continue to do this pattern, again, about 4 or 5 times. We're going to take that pin out. It looks all baggy, don't worry too much about that. I'm going to pull that button up so everything's nice and tight. I'm going to stitch through to bring it through to the front, and it's trapped right now in between the fabric and between the button. And I'm going to create that bank, which is a little post, 2, 3, 4, and just go 5 times around, keeping it nice and tense while you're doing that. Okay, and you want to bring it now back to the back of the fabric. Just going to again fasten it off by passing underneath the stitch, pulling through all of that loose thread, and then what you want to do is pass your needle through the loop that you have here, okay, in order to knot it. If you feel like you want to do a couple of knots, that's fine, and then you can clip it off. I personally like to pass it underneath the stitch to clip it off, just in order to make sure it's nice and tidy. We're going to start off just by learning a few simple stitches that you might use for mending. Today the supplies that you're going to need are just a needle, some thread. Today I'm going to be using cotton due to the fact that the piece of garment that I'm doing is a natural fabric, and a little pair of scissors. We'll thread the needle first. I'm threading with a double thread today. If you're doing something more intricate, you may just want to use a single thread, but for a lot of mending, a double thread is the best way to go. So all I've done here is a little knot on the end. The first stitch we're going to do is the most simple stitch to do, is a running stitch. So you just put the needle through from back to front, basically going down through the fabric, and make a little gap. Try not to pull too tight that it pulls the fabric. Keep it nice and tight in your hand, and up. Okay, so you just have a dotted line like this. This is the running stitch. This stitch is really useful if you just want to keep something held together temporarily. That's what you would use a running stitch for. Okay, when you're done your running stitch, you want to tie off. There's a couple of ways of doing it. You can do a back stitch onto the area you've just sewn, and you can pass back through the loop. And when I do this, I would put another knot in there as well. So that's your running stitch. It's the most straightforward one. So we're moving on to the back stitch. Back stitch is really useful if you want to hold something very strongly in place. It's a good one to use for mending different projects. So start by passing the needle through the fabric, pulling it through all the way until that knot catches on the other side. So for the back stitch, as the name implies, we're going to be stitching backwards. So take your stitch backwards. The length of the stitch is kind of dependent on what you're working on. If you want something very fine and intricate, you'll do a very small stitch. If it's something larger and it doesn't have to be quite as intricate, you can do a larger stitch. So I've just pulled through to this side. I'm going to go ahead of that stitch now and do my next stitch in front of it. Okay, so I pull all the thread through, and then down into that hole that I was in earlier here. So this time we have no gap in between the stitches. Okay, so we just continue on like that. Go ahead of that stitch, and you're always stitching backwards into the hole that you were just in previously. Okay, so this is the back stitch. So it's basically securing itself every time it goes through, and don't worry if things like this happen, you just pull it back through. Go and just even it up a little bit, and just make sure you fix your fabric as you go. So once you've done all of your back stitching, you can just come to the back of the fabric and pass through and secure with your knot at the back, okay, just by passing it through the loop and tightening all the way up. For the demonstration, I'm going to be using a navy blue thread, but I would have usually matched to the colour of the actual garment. For this mend, it's a small hole, I'm just going to use a whip stitch to bring it together. If you have a larger hole, you may have to patch it or do something different depending on what type of material your fabric is made of. So it's a small hole here, it's just in the armpit of a sweater. I have my threaded needle here, I have a knot in the end, and I've gone for double threaded here. So here's our hole, it's just near the hemline of the fabric. I'm just going to press them together like this. It's a small enough hole that we should be able to mend this up without having to patch it. So I'm going to pass my needle from the bottom side to the top side of the hole, holding it closed until I get to my knot. I'm going to stop there, and I'm just going to do the whip stitch by coming over the top back towards myself and then passing back through again. Okay, and that's basically all that you're doing the whole time you're doing the whip stitch. I'm just going to hold that tail just to keep it nice and tight, and back over the top towards myself, and I'm always pushing the needle from myself away. And once you're done there, you're just going to do your final stitch by going through. But this time, instead of pulling all the way through, I'm just going to form it into a knot by passing the needle through the loop and pulling tight on there. And that's it. I'm going to cut off here that tail, and you could trim your first tail as well, nice and close so it's nice and neat. We'll have closed up that hole on the other side. Again, if the thread was the correct color, you wouldn't see it on this side. You can kind of see a little bit. It's just whip stitch. We've ran through a couple of very basic skills for mending today. There are a lot of other ways of mending things out there. YouTube obviously is a great resource to check out if you want proper videos or anything more detailed. It's a great place to look. and yeah, have fun, mend your stuff, keep wearing it, and don't throw things out.
Mending your clothes instead of throwing them away will 1. Save you money, 2. Divert waste from the landfill, and 3. Save on carbon emissions that would normally be generated by buying new. So next time you lose a button on your shirt, find a hole or a tear in your jeans, pull out these useful sewing skills and mend them. You can do it. I believe in you. We have also included some helpful clothing repair resources for you below. And a big thank you to Michelle for joining us today and sharing her sewing skills with us. Please be sure to like this video and share it with a friend. See you next time.